Hello, West Africa and Africa. I'm back again. My name is Cecile with the Sober Talk session at Cecil Talk All, plus all that concerns Africa. This is another epic video about the United States of America and the West. As I always make intro of my video, that my video is not precisely a money-making whatever. But anyhow, I took my time, I always take my time to rearrange all these things. Whomsoever would like to subscribe, I will appreciate that. Put thumbs up, dislike, or your comment. That's all about life. Uh, Please, African brothers and sisters, as I said in the beginning, it's not all about, it's not all about money. Watch this video over and over. Don't watch this video with emotions or sentiment. This video, it's an educative video, for Africans.
The Biden administration, the let's go lick the world Biden administration, and the legacy media, the licking legacy media, are panicked, gang. They're absolutely panicked. They are increasingly recognizing that their days are numbered, and they're in full survival mode right now. In many respects, what's happening in our nation, a way of kind of thinking about what's happening, is if you asked anybody else out there in the world, what do you think of the United States, right? You often got a binary answer. You got, well, we're very admiring of the United States. We're certainly very appreciative of the United States here. But we don't like how the United States is such a bully. And what we have done, I know many of you know, what we've done, at least since the end of the Cold War, what we've done is we've basically told the rest of the world, you're going to adopt our way of life or we're going to crush you. I mean, just ask Venezuela or Cuba, certainly Cuba going back to the 60s, North Korea, Iran. You adopt our way of life, we're going to turn you into a villain, and rightly or wrongly, and we are going to crush you. So we have been pushing, for lack of a better term, a despotic democracy model around the world. We don't care if you're an actual democracy. You just have to play by our rules. And if you don't, we crush you. And what we have to understand is those despotic tactics that we've been using on other populations outside the United States are now coming home to roost. We're now using it on our population. That's basically what's happening. And the regime has been forced to do that because they're in survival mode. They're literally trying to hold on to power and extend their limited days as far as they can. But I assure you, many of our ruling elite recognize that we are in the last days.
Those 15 words are haunting Clinton in coal country, but her campaign says she was taken out of context.
I'm the only candidate which has a policy about how to bring economic opportunity using clean, renewable energy as the key into coal country, because we're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business.
She said, I'm going to put the miners and the mines out of business. That's a tough one to explain, wouldn't you say? We're going to put the miners back to work. We're going to put the miners back to work. We're going to get those mines open.
So watch this video very carefully and listen to what these American brothers are saying, and watch what led Hillary Clinton to lose to Donald Trump the last election. Hear her comment and hear Donald Trump's comment. Watch this video and judge yourself. And watch the next speaker, whom is my own mentor, Sir George Galloway, the man with the black belt. He was once a Labour candidate MP. but he was thrown out of the Labour Party just because he was just like that, you know. He said it as it should be. So watch this video and watch the end of the video. Listen to all what the other sister, you know, there's another Indian. Watch very carefully. Listen to the sister.
The investigation, of course, is one that might never come to a conclusion if the intention is to throw sand in our eyes by implying that these documents are not genuine or in part not genuine or have been altered or falsified in some way. It's difficult to see which way for the American state, the deep state, to turn on this, because it's only a month or 2 or 3 before we can see that they were lying, that there was no counteroffensive. And if there was, that it was a flop. I mean, they're trying to buy time, but buy time for what, Larry?
Well, at the same time, they've got the pretense, this false story, that it is a unified NATO, that we're all pulling in the same direction to oppose Russia. And that's just not the case. As you've seen, the United States is busy trying to impose sanctions on Hungary. France has come out and spoken very clearly about the need to not be saddled, chained together with the United States, particularly when it comes to issues like Taiwan. So the entire premise of U.S. foreign policy is literally unraveling over the last 2 months in the wake of the Putin-Xi Jinping summit in Moscow. We now see Saudi Arabia taking a completely independent course. We see the Chinese with the Saudis negotiating an end to the war in Yemen. That's underway. We see Saudi Arabia and Iran reaching peace.
That's it.
Because in the past, the United States used the Saudis as a wedge to try to provoke conflict in the region. You see Russia working with Turkey to bring rapprochement between Turkey and Syria. All of a sudden, several cornerstones of U.S. foreign policy are just falling apart. So this goes much beyond just the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is, in fact, somewhat of a symptom of the loss of U.S. power and influence in the world. And thank God, because what the United States has been doing over the last 25 years it's a vicious bully, and it's been killing people and leaving trails of blood instead of bringing about a more peaceful world.
And yet, as the saying goes, when you're in a hole, stop digging. But they are breaking that law.
Yeah.
I could have set my stopwatch, but Singapore just upgraded its relations with China. And lo and behold, in the New York Times today, there's a smear on Singapore of the type that we've seen before. Well, Singapore's a big success story, but at what cost? Look at the lack of this, that, and the next thing in Singapore. Ditto Macron. Macron is getting the full Mark Rubio treatment. He is being accused of betrayal because he made the blindingly obvious observation that to be someone's ally is not the same thing as being their vassal. So they don't seem to be reading the room in Washington.
Yeah. Well, you and I are about the same age. You recall how Charles de Gaulle used to constantly tweak the Washington president, and whoever it was at the time, that de Gaulle was not going to be on his knees bowing and scraping before the West. He was going to do what he wanted, what he felt was best in France's interest. Now, I think Macron is a terrible leader, but he's smart enough to recognize that tying himself to the United States at this point is a losing cause. By contrast, I don't know if you saw any of the images of Rishi Sunak with Joe Biden today. My Lord, I have never seen a sycophant sucking up in such a. I mean, he was like a schoolgirl with one of the Beatles back in the day. I mean, he was just giddy with joy. No gravitas about that. And, Joe Biden probably didn't even know where he was.
And he certainly ain't no John Lennon, not even a Ringo Starr.
Yeah.
But the reality is that this West of which we speak is an Anglo-Saxon bubble, isn't it? And that's increasingly obvious. There was some polling done by that is out of the bag. The identification of the US with a losing cause is now almost universal.
Well, the United States has gotten away just in the last 23 years, an invasion of Afghanistan, an invasion of Iraq, an invasion of Syria, military operations in Libya, attempted coup, a successful coup in the Maidan in Ukraine,
Africans listening.
Attempted coups in Belarus, in Kazakhstan, in Georgia. And so the United States is out of control. We have, up to this point, been able to throw our weight around, overthrow governments at will, and gotten away with it. And nobody's pushed back. But now Russia's pushing back. Russia's saying no more. And the Chinese watched this, I think, very carefully and realized that if they did not stand with Russia in pushing back against the West, they would be the next ones on the chopping block. Because the language here in the United States is that China is our enemy.
Show you how. As thousands die on the battlefield, American oil companies are raking in billions. How many, you ask? Try 200 billion. And this is just in profits. US oil companies have reaped $200 billion in pure profits. The war in Ukraine shook up the energy market because the West, led by the US, sanctioned Russian oil supplies, Russian energy supplies. They restricted Russian oil and gas supplies. And US companies were the clear beneficiaries of this. We're talking about data from November 2022. That was more than 4 months ago. The earnings are still on. They're still milking this war and sharing the spoils. Oil companies are cutting big checks to their executives. Case in point, ExxonMobil. It's one of the world's biggest energy companies. Its chief executive is a man called Darren Woods. He's just got a pay raise. A dream increment, if you ask me. Woods got a salary hike of 52%. So now his salary will be almost $36 million. That's close to 300 crore rupees, the salary of a CEO. Plus there's a bonus and stock rewards. And there's a hike there too. An 80% hike, 80%. So his bonus and stock rewards will go up by 80%. And it's not like ExxonMobil is hiding any of this. The company says the bumper pay for Woods was quote-unquote reflective of record earnings and stock price performance. In other words, they're making big money. So let's pull up those numbers. Let's look at how ExxonMobil has been doing. In 2022, the company made $56 billion in profits. That's $6.3 million every hour in profits. I'll repeat that, $6.3 million every hour in profits. The shares of the company have every hour in profits. I'll repeat that, $6.3 million every hour in profits. The shares of the company have last year. This is so brazen that even the US president had to speak out. Joe Biden said ExxonMobil is making more money than God. He said the profiteering by oil companies was outrageous.
Oil companies' record profits today are not because they're doing something new or innovative. Their profits are a windfall of war, the windfall from the brutal conflict that's ravaging Ukraine and hurting tens of millions of people around the globe.
But ExxonMobil is not the only company. Other major oil producers are also minting money, like Chevron. That's another major US oil producer, also the main rival of Exxon. Chevron made a record $36.5 billion. The European peers are making big profits too, like Shell. Shell announced its biggest profits in history. This company, Shell, has been around for 115 years. And last year, they made their biggest profits ever. Profits worth $39.9 billion. British giant BP was not too far behind. It has reported $27.7 billion in profit, and these are all big numbers. They confirm what the world has known for a while. Oil companies capitalize on instability, and they are profiting from pain. American oil companies are masters of this art. Time and again, as the American war machine enters conflicts, American oil companies take home big checks. You may remember the war in Iraq. The US went to war in Iraq by selling a lie. They said Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein had WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, and that they pose a threat to the world. So America invaded Iraq, ostensibly to save the world and bring democracy. As it happened, they only helped themselves. Iraq was devastated. Saddam Hussein was killed. The Americans did not find any weapons of mass destruction, but they did find lots of oil. After the invasion, a slew of American oil companies rushed to Iraq, from ExxonMobil to Chevron and Halliburton. They all got a share of the loot. They all got access to Iraq's oil. And in the years since, American officials have admitted this. They've confirmed that the war was only about Iraq's oil. I have some statements. The first one is from General John Abizad.
What goes wrong comes
He's the
from.
former head of U.S. Central Command and military operations in Iraq. Listen to what he said, and I'm quoting. Of course, it's about oil. We can't really deny that. Next, we have Alan Greenspan, the former chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve. He wrote this in his memoir, and I'm quoting again, "I'm saddened that it is politically inconvenient to acknowledge what everyone knows. The Iraq war is largely about oil." Then there's Chuck Hagel, a former U.S. Defense Secretary. This is what he said. "People say we're not fighting for oil. Of course we are." He said it in as many words. Iraqi lives are just collateral damage. And this story is not over. It's repeating itself in Ukraine.